It is strange how wealth draws crowds, yet leaves the heart lonelier than ever. Elelynina Hartwell stood at her kitchen window, staring out at land that once gave her peace. The morning sun stretched long shadows across the white fence posts of Meadowbrook Ranch, each one straight and still like silent guards. At 42, the ranch that once felt like freedom now felt like a beautiful prison. 3 months had passed since her husband Charles died in a riding accident, leaving behind a fortune built on cattle, oil wells, and real estate worth nearly $8 million. The lawyer said she would never need to worry again, but money could not fill the ache in her chest or the empty space beside her at night. Heavy boots hit the front porch, sharp and unexpected. Elelynina's heart jumped. She was not expecting anyone, and the nearest neighbor lived 5 miles away. Through the lace curtain, she saw a massive figure, a man so tall he had to lower his head under the porch roof. For a moment she froze, her hand tight against the counter, her mind racing. When she opened the door, she had to look up. The man standing there was the largest she had ever seen. He stood well over 6'8", shoulders wide enough to block the light behind him. His denim shirt was faded, his jeans worn thin at the knees. His boots were scuffed, his hat bent out of shape. His face was rough from sun and wind, but his green eyes held something else, desperation. "Ma'am," he said, removing his hat. Thick brown hair fell loose. "My name is Jake Sullivan. I heard about your husband. I need work." Elelynina's first instinct was fear. She was alone. This ranch was isolated. He was a stranger, and an intimidating one. Her fingers tightened on the door frame. "I'm not hiring," she said carefully. "I'm thinking about selling the ranch." Jake's face fell. In that moment, the giant man looked like a lost boy. "Please, Mrs. Hartwell, I've been out of work 2 months. The Henderson place shut down. I got nowhere else to go." His voice cracked as he spoke. "I can fix fences, work cattle. I don't drink. I don't cause trouble. I just need a chance." She studied him. His jaw was tight. His hands trembled as he held his hat. This was not pride. This was survival. "Where have you been staying?" she asked. Jake's cheeks turned red. "My truck." "Sometimes the shelter in Billings when it's cold." The words hit her harder than she expected. This massive man, strong enough to carry the ranch on his back, reduced to sleeping in a truck. Sympathy pulled at her, fighting against caution. "I'm sorry," she said. "I really can't. Please." And before she could react, Jake dropped to one knee on her porch. The sight was shocking. A giant, kneeling like a knight from an old story. Elelynina glanced around, suddenly aware of how this must look. "Get up," she whispered. "Please." He stood, his face burning with shame. "I didn't mean to. I just don't know what else to do." She closed her eyes. Every sensible thought warned her against this. But grief recognized grief. Loneliness recognized loneliness. "There's a bunkhouse," she said quietly. "It hasn't been used in years. You can stay a few days, just while you look for work." Jake's face filled with relief so real it softened her chest. "Thank you. I swear you won't regret it." She watched him walk toward the bunkhouse, his broad back straight with new purpose, and wondered if she already did. Over the next week, Jake proved himself. Broken fences were repaired. The barn was cleaned. The old water pump finally worked again. He never complained. He never lingered where he was not invited. But his presence changed the ranch. Elelynina caught herself watching him from the window, watching how his body moved with calm strength. One afternoon, he pulled off his shirt in the heat, and guilt struck her hard for noticing the shape of his shoulders and arms. Friday evening, he knocked on her door, hat in hand. "I just wanted to thank you," he said. "I don't want to overstay." "Did you find other work?" she asked. He shook his head. No references. No one wants to take the risk. Quote, "Why?" she asked. He hesitated. "An incident. The rancher's daughter made advances. I turned her down. Her husband saw us. I was fired." Jealousy surprised her. She pushed it down. You were blamed for something you didn't do, she said. Story of my life, Jake replied. People see my size and assume the worst. She saw the pain beneath his words. Stay, she said suddenly. Work for me. I need help. Tears filled his eyes. You mean it? Quote, I do. 2 months passed. They settled into routine. Evenings on the porch, quiet talks, stories of his childhood in foster care. His dream of having a place to belong. One evening, as the sky turned pink and gold, he looked at her and asked, Would you ever see past a man like me? She stood too fast, her face warm. I should go. But the question stayed with her. The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday. She returned from town to find Jake soaked, shivering in her kitchen. The bunkhouse roof is leaking, he said. You'll stay here tonight, she said. Guest room. He hesitated. That's not a good idea. Why not? His eyes locked on hers. His voice dropped. Because I'm in love with you. The words hung between them, heavy and dangerous, and Elelonina knew nothing would ever feel the same again. The words Jake spoke did not fade when the door closed behind him. They stayed with Elelonina through the long night, echoing in the quiet halls of the house that once held laughter and certainty. She lay awake in the wide bed she had shared with Charles, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain strike the roof like restless fingers. Jake's confession had torn open something she had worked hard to keep sealed. Grief, want, fear, all tangled together. Morning came gray and heavy. Elelonina rose early, hoping work would clear her mind. From the kitchen window, she saw Jake already outside, repairing fence posts in the mud, shoulders hunched against the cold rain. He did not look toward the house. That hurt more than she expected. For the next 2 weeks, they moved carefully around each other. Jake worked harder than ever, leaving before sunrise and returning after dark. He spoke only when necessary. Elelonina missed their talks more than she admitted. The ranch felt tense, like it was holding its breath. Then Patricia arrived. Elelonina heard the car before she saw it. A sleek sedan rolled up the drive, out of place among the dirt and grass. Patricia stepped out dressed neatly, her eyes sharp as they swept the property. So this is where you're hiding, Patricia said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. All alone out here. I'm not hiding, Elelonina replied evenly. Patricia glanced out the window and froze when she saw Jake lifting a heavy beam with ease. Who is that man? My ranch hand, Elelonina said. Patricia's lips pressed together. He's enormous. Where did you find him? He needed work. Patricia turned slowly. Do you know anything about him? Yes, Elelonina said firmly. Patricia's voice lowered. People are talking. They think you're having an affair. Anger flared. That's not true. Isn't it? Patricia asked. A rich widow and her hired help living alone together. What do you expect people to think? Quote. The words cut deeper than Elelonina wanted to admit. That night she stood outside the bunkhouse, heart pounding. Jake opened the door, surprise crossing his face. We need to talk, she said. Inside, the room was simple. A narrow bed, a small table, a few books, a life stripped down to the bare bones. People are talking, she said. About us. Jake's face hardened. Let them. I can't, she said softly. I have a reputation. I have Charles's name to protect. Jake was quiet for a long moment. Are you firing me? Tears burned her eyes. I think it's best. The silence was heavy. Then Jake dropped to one knee again. Marry me, he said. Her breath caught. What? I love you, he said. I have nothing, but I will give you everything I am. Let me stay. Let me work for you. I can make you happy. I can even get you pregnant again. The words shocked her. Raw, honest, terrifying. Get up, she whispered. Not until you answer. She looked at him and saw more than desperation. She saw loyalty, strength. A man who had been judged his whole life and still chose kindness. People will say I'm crazy, she said. Are you? He asked gently. She thought of the empty house, the silence, the way Jake had brought warmth back into her days. "Yes," she said quietly. "I am." Jake rose slowly, disbelief turning into hope. When he pulled her into his arms, the world felt steady for the first time in months. The wedding was small, a courthouse in Billings. No guests, no fuss, just promises spoken plainly. When they returned to the ranch, the phones rang without rest. Shock. Anger. Warnings. Patricia called last. "You've lost your mind," she said. Elena watched Jake cooking dinner, moving carefully, confidently. "I'm happy," she replied. And she was. Life together settled into something strong and gentle. Jake moved into the main house. He treated Elena with care and respect, always mindful of her past. They worked as partners. Her business sense. His practical skill. The ranch flourished. 3 months later, Elena stared at the pregnancy test in disbelief. 2 pink lines. Jake dropped to his knees again, pressing his forehead to her stomach, whispering thanks. Tears filled her eyes as she ran her fingers through his hair. The gossip slowed. Reality settled in. Even Patricia softened when she heard the news. One evening, as the sun set over the ranch, Jake spoke quietly. "I never thought I'd have this." "A family?" Elena asked. "A home," he said. She leaned against him. "Neither did I." They sat in silence, as stars filled the sky, knowing their story was not what anyone expected, but it was theirs. The months that followed changed everything. Elena's pregnancy became impossible to hide, and with it came a shift in how the world treated them. The whispers that once followed her through town softened into quiet curiosity. Some people still judged, others simply accepted what they could not change. Elena learned quickly which voices mattered and which did not. Jake's hand never left her back when they walked together, steady and sure, as if reminding the world she was no longer alone. Jake took to fatherhood before the baby even arrived. He read books at night, sitting stiffly on the edge of the bed, lips moving slowly over each word. He spoke to Elena's belly every morning before work, telling stories about the ranch, about the horses, about the life waiting beyond the womb. Elena watched him with quiet wonder. This man who once begged on her porch now carried himself with purpose. Not pride. Purpose. Pregnancy was not easy for Elena. Her age brought complications. There were days when nausea pinned her to the bed, when fear crept in late at night. Jake never left her side. He learned how to cook gentle meals. He helped her dress when her back ached. He listened without fixing, without rushing her grief for the life she had lost with Charles and the future she never expected. One afternoon, Patricia returned. This time, she arrived without sharp words or cold looks. She stood awkwardly in the doorway, eyes drifting to Elena's rounded belly. "I was wrong," Patricia said quietly. "I didn't think this would last." Elena studied her sister-in-law for a long moment. "Neither did I." Patricia nodded, her voice softer. "But you look happy." "I am," Elena said, and she meant it without hesitation. Jake entered the room then, removing his hat out of habit. He greeted Patricia politely, no bitterness in his tone. That alone shifted something. When Patricia left later that evening, she hugged Elena carefully and told her she hoped the baby would be healthy. It was not forgiveness, but it was peace. As winter settled over Montana, the ranch changed. Snow covered the fences. The nights grew long. Inside the house, warmth returned. Laughter replaced silence. Jake fixed what had long been broken, not just in the walls or the barn, but in Elena herself. Late one night, as wind pressed against the windows, Elena woke in pain. Fear rushed through her. Jake was instantly alert. He helped her dress, his hands steady even as worry filled his eyes. The drive to the hospital felt endless, the road dark and quiet. Labor lasted through the night. Elena cried out, gripping Jake's hand, refusing to let go. He whispered encouragement, grounding her when fear threatened to take over. When the baby finally arrived, a strong cry filled the room. "It's a boy," the doctor said. Jake broke down completely. He pressed his forehead to Eleanina's, tears falling freely. "Thank you," he whispered again and again. They named him Samuel, after Jake's father, a man Eleanina had only heard about through stories, but whose kindness lived on in his son. Bringing Samuel home changed the ranch once more. Life became louder, messier, more real. Jake rose at night without complaint. Eleanina learned that love was not just passion or comfort. It was sacrifice made willingly, without keeping score. The town adjusted. Some never approved. Most moved on. New stories replaced old gossip. Meadowbrook Ranch thrived. Jake expanded the cattle operation carefully, respecting the land. Eleanina handled contracts and growth with sharp focus. Together they became something stronger than either had been alone. One evening, months later, Eleanina stood on the porch holding Samuel as the sun sank low. Jake leaned against the railing beside her. "Do you regret it?" he asked quietly. She turned to him, surprised. "Regret what?" "Letting me stay," he said. "Taking a risk on a man with nothing." Eleanina smiled softly. "You didn't come with nothing," she said. "You came with a heart that refused to break." Jake looked out over the land, his jaw tight. "I spent my whole life thinking I wasn't enough." She rested her head against his shoulder. "You were always enough. The world just took too long to see it." As the sky darkened, a coyote's call echoed across the plains. Jake's arm wrapped around her, pulling her close, Samuel safe between them. Eleanina felt a calm she once believed impossible. Wealth had given her comfort. Loss had given her pain. But love, unexpected and brave, had given her life again. The rich widow and the giant who once begged at her door had built something real. Not perfect, not quiet, but honest. And as stars filled the sky above Meadowbrook Ranch, Eleanina knew without doubt that this was home.